Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, leaders. It's Alicia Cowan. Welcome to episode number 55 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. It is the beginning of December as I'm recording this, so I'm trying to do my work ahead of the holidays so that I can fully unplug. That was actually what my last episode was all about. So we're recording a little bit earlier in the month so that we can take the rest of the month off and spend it with friends and family. I've mentioned it in previous podcasts, but we will be having a ton of friends and family in town for both Christmas holiday and New Year's holiday. We celebrate both in a big way. So it's going to be a lot of fun at the end of the year. And so we're looking forward to that in about a month from now. But what I want to talk to you about today too is 2024 has been a huge year for me and the podcast. And it's been a lot of fun talking to you in this format and in this way. And I always talk about my clients to include my podcast listeners, that, whether you've listened to one episode or several, I just appreciate you. And I've had a chance to engage and hear from a lot of listeners this year, which has been really fun. And so I love hearing from you. So if you ever want to reach out and comment or just say hi, I love to hear from you. So I'm very appreciative and grateful for you this year. So I just want to say that just to kick things off. It has been one heck of a year, and there is a lot to celebrate for the holidays. So I am very much looking forward to that. So hope your holiday season, or whatever season you're in as you're listening to this, is going well for you right now. What I want to dig into is this topic of prepping for the performance management season and annual reviews. I mentioned this on our last podcast because I talked a lot about getting yourself wrapped up on all the things that you need to kind of tick and tie before the holidays. And this is one that if you are on a calendar year where you do performance management and annual reviews, then this time of year, this can take up a lot of mental space for any leader of a company. And so I want to talk about how to prep for it and get yourself ready. And I'm going to continue to talk about this topic over the next couple of weeks, just because I know what a big deal it is for a senior leader to go through the season of annual reviews. So that's what we're going to deep dive into. And we're going to talk a little bit more from the lens of being a senior leader. And so doing a performance review cycle is one of the most important strategic moments of the entire year. And I want to be clear, as someone that has spent time in an organization as an operational leader, like on the management side of the house, but also on the HR side of the house, I know that the HR mechanism of doing performance reviews can feel a lot like a checkbox. And I've thought a lot about this from a lot of different angles. I think really what a performance management review system is meant to do is a mechanism to scale the review process and to allow an accountability process, right? Basically, and a tracking system, right? To make sure that we're doing all of these activities. But essentially, I think about it from a leader's point of view and an associate's point of view. It really, at its simplest form, is just a mechanism to make sure that as we set goals as an organization, and then we deliver goals to associates, that we give people feedback and we talk about where they won and where they still have areas of growth. And we reflect on the past year. And then we take a look forward as we set goals for the next year. And we just talk about performance and have a really amazing conversation around performance and growth. That's what it's truly about. There are a lot of logistics that have to go into it. There's a lot that you have to do as a senior leader around messaging and goal setting and accountability across the organization. But at its core, that's what it's really all about. And so it's really an opportunity to align teams across all levels, up and down. It really sets up a company for success. We're talking about 2025 on this particular podcast, but for whatever season or year that you're in. And it really strengthens the organizational culture if you do it well and you do it often. And I say that in the sense of having feedback conversations often. And so I think at its core, I think it's always important. I want to start off this podcast by saying it's important to strip it down and understand why we do this process. I also think, too, a lot of times organizations align performance from the past year or whatever cycle that they measure it within, and they really measure it, and they also then reward meaning in the form of delivering merit or compensation or bonuses based on that performance. And so I think it's really important as a senior leader to think about what you want to reward, because rewarded behavior will be repeated. It also shows the company like what is valued to the every level within the organization. It tells an associate what is valued, and it really shows if we back up our company's mission and our values and how we treat people, we will do it through the performance review and the reward process. So what I mean by that is if someone is behaving well in the way that is in line with our values, and not only just driving results, but doing the how in a really like way that is in line with the integrity of the company, and then we reward that, that means we're walking the walk as well as talking the talk, right? We always hear about companies that have maybe their values on the wall, or right, they have this mission statement, but then they don't actually live that culture or live those values through their actions. The performance review process at its core, if merit and money and bonuses are tied to past performance, which a lot are, it really then emphasizes what the company values in how they reward leaders and their performance. Okay. So think about it at that core essence of performance management. And that's why I think as a senior leader, it's so important for you to think about and talk about, because it's not just an HR mechanism. Yes, HR may own the tools and the logistics and the calendar, all of that, but it's not an HR mechanism. It truly is a leadership way to drive and strengthen organizational culture. So we're going to start out by talking about how to prep and set the tone for a productive review season. The first step that you can take as a senior leader to set your team and the organization up for success is really to think about how you want to set the tone for a really productive review season. So as I mentioned, this is an enterprise-wide initiative that it needs to be a reflection of your company's vision. And this is where your leadership really matters. Your tone and how this initiative is messaged really matters, because that message is going to flow down and across the organization. And so it's really important that you and your leadership team are aligned on the messaging, and you're reinforcing the same messages, the same goals across all the levels, and they hear from you why it's so important. So I think it's important to not just like have these like generic talk tracks and talking points, but I think to really make them their own and really think about how you can influence and inspire the team to really understand the core of why these things are so important and how to do it really well. So think about that messaging before you dive in to any of this. The next step is a little bit more tactical. Really, it's important for you to set the team up and put some things into place that will make review writing so much easier. And the first one is to make sure everybody has the tools they need to review performance in terms of metrics and contributions. So senior leaders, you need to take a look at just the high level of what metrics are going to be evaluated for all of the individuals, and to make sure, again, these metrics align with what the broader organizational objectives are. And so it's going to take a deep dive and a deep understanding of how each leader's performance really will directly impact the business. So what like lines of business you have, understanding how they tie back, and then really making sure the metrics tie to that. And then when you're thinking about your own direct reports, you've got to think carefully about like what strategic contributions have they made Did they deliver on those key projects or initiatives that you asked them to? Do they align with the enterprise priorities? And really important, not only it was what they delivered, but also how they delivered it. And so again, that's that integrity check of, did they model those behaviors that support the culture? It's a great way to do an integrity check with yourself just to make sure that you are expecting the same of your direct reports that you would across the organization. Then you want to go down and go through not only the wins, but also look at any growth areas that you might have. A lot of people shut down, no matter what level they're at, they shut down with anything that could be perceived as negative feedback, any non-positive feedback. They can really break down and not realize that it's really just meant to help them grow. So I think carefully crafting any areas of growth or any areas that will support their future success, that you really think thoughtfully about examples and really carefully craft those and get those ready for the performance review season. Okay. And I think this is an important one because I think when we think about the values that I was talking about earlier, I think it's important, of course, to recognize people that delivered operationally and delivered results. That's super important. Again, that how is also super important. And I also think the ability to think about if this is something your company values, if innovation is super important, if taking risks is super important, that also is going to come with some failure, because anybody that's innovating and taking risks and trying new things is going to fail inevitably at some point on their way to success. So I think it's also important to really kind of step back and look at it from a 30,000-foot view to make sure that you're calling out what I would call, I guess it's like a growth and a learning, and it's a positive value to take risks and to potentially fail and to innovate, as well as actually deliver results. Again, if that's something your company values, and a lot of companies do nowadays, so I think it's important, again, to balance just the delivery of results, but also with somebody that's taking some of those key behaviors that you would want them to, like taking a risk, because that's not always going to go and result in a win. But if they're taking the right risks and the right calculated risks and not hitting 100% of the time, that's okay. And I think it's important to acknowledge. So while you're looking for some of the wins and some of the key metrics, also looking at those areas of development and or areas of behavioral things that you want to see repeated, things that you value, like taking risks or innovating, okay, at the same time. All right. So we've thought about some of the key elements. We've thought about some of the KPIs. Next, it's important to think about for yourself if you need some coaching support, your team needs some coaching support, and or how they are coaching themselves as senior leaders. So as C-suite leaders, I talk to you as a group, as a clientele often. And I know a lot of times you feel like this like heavy weight of some of the decisions that you have to make, especially around performance review season. There's so many factors, not just the individual's reviews they're writing, but the organization, the compensation decisions, sometimes promotion decisions that have come out of it, how to deliver some of this really tough feedback to people that might be surprised to hear it and maybe are challenged in receiving some of the feedback, but you don't have to do any of this alone. Coaching can become really helpful and vital when it's time to prepare for some of these high stakes conversations. So coaches like me work with you, not just on just the logistics or the how-to of giving feedback, but really aligning feedback with, again, that strategy and that strategic side of planning for the company's future goals and vision, and then managing some of those tougher dynamics of being a leader, and also ensure that you're coaching your leaders in a way that's going to help drive results with the entire team. And I want you to think about as well how to coach your leadership team to also be coaches. This is where your influence really can grow When you start to help them frame up feedback and develop talent that is in alignment with your vision, then things really start to take off and catch fire. And when you have the right coach coaching you, then you can confidently lead your teams through these type of tough, critical conversations. So just a little bit of food for thought. And then lastly, in this next section, I want to talk about a way to make it a two-way dialogue. So to think about how to create like this little ecosystem of feedback. So as senior leaders, again, your performance reviews are not ever meant to be one-way conversations. The same goes for your team. The best leadership teams create this little ecosystem of feedback where leaders at every level feel empowered to provide input. Doesn't mean everybody has to take action on that input. Doesn't mean every piece of it has to be true, but everybody at least has to feel comfortable in giving it and giving in their thoughts and opinions, right? Because it is their perspective. So this should include talking to your direct reports about it, who they also lead their own teams. And you have to understand what support they need from you in order to be successful in the next year. This year that we're talking about, particularly today, is 2025. So it's important to ask that, how can you as their leader create an environment for them to succeed? And these questions just go beyond just like individuals' feedback. They should also address like how you as a leadership team can all operate more efficiently as like this unified leadership group. And so this two-way dialogue should extend throughout your leadership team, but also create this cascading effect of feedback throughout the organization, which will help you reinforce this culture of improvement and really, really open communication. Okay. And this one, again, the last thing I want to talk about is the idea that you can potentially block some time before the holidays for goal alignment. And so I don't mean block time during the holidays. Notice I said before you go out for the holidays, take time to make sure that you're thinking through an enterprise-wide alignment on some of your strategic goals. When you get back to the office, make sure you've got time that you can calibrate with your leadership team and revisit your 2025 goals and make sure they are tightly aligned with your overarching business strategy. This time should not just be about, again, the performance reviews and the performance review season, but about this leadership alignment with the larger goals. So when you create that alignment early on, it's going to set the stage for this really cohesive, focused team as you move into the new year. I had a client do this where every year before the new calendar year and annual performance review cycle starts over, they meet and they all align on the goals that they want to meet and achieve as a team. And then they check in throughout the year to make sure they either recalibrate and maneuver or change goals, or if they're on track and they like where they're headed, they like the goals, then they just check in and report out progress to make sure they're aligned. But it helps because it trickles down beyond that leadership team to keep everyone on the same page and accountable towards that level of success. So super important. And again, these conversations are not meant to be rushed. So planning the time before the holidays and taking the time to be thoughtful and intentional with your leadership team is going to go a long way and carry throughout 2025. All right. So those are my tips on how to prepare for the annual performance review season. I will have more topics, more conversations over the coming weeks just to talk through performance review season because there is a lot of nuance in it. But this is really to help get you prepared as we wrap up the end of 2024 and head into 2025. Again, this totally applies no matter whatever season you're in, but to really like put a pin in what we have done so far and how to get ready for what's ahead of us and what's next. So whether you are leading or coaching or prepping or planning for performance reviews, it's not just about closing out the year. Again, to bring it back, these are such a critical opportunity to reinforce strategy, to get aligned with your leadership team and to set everybody up for success in 2025. And if you're looking to refine your leadership approach or need help with you or your team navigating these like high-level conversations, as an executive coach, I can absolutely help you through this and help make a difference. And we can make sure that your performance reviews will drive real actionable results across the team. So if you need help with this, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me through my website. It's EliciaCowanCoaching.com, ElisiaKeown coaching.com. And until next time, I appreciate you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at EliciaCowanCoaching.com/call.